Hello, and welcome to Beyond Biotech, the weekly podcast from Labiotech. I'm Dylan Kassane, and this is episode 188 for the podcast. Today, we welcome Janita Good, a partner at Fieldfisher with nearly 2 decades of experience advising top organizations in pharmaceuticals, biotechnology, and medical devices. With a DPhil in biochemistry from the University of Oxford, Janita brings a unique blend of scientific insight and legal expertise to her work on venture investments, joint ventures, partnerships, and M&A deals. She's advised on landmark transactions including funding rounds for Phinova and Medinex, and collaborations like Intelligent Ultrasound's AI imaging partnerships. In this episode, Janita shares practical guidance for biotech leaders on timing partnerships with large pharma companies, planning for commercialization right from the start, balancing optimistic fundraising with realistic deal projections, and avoiding common legal pitfalls in M&A. We'll also look ahead to emerging trends in the sector and talk through the best way to structure a company for tax-effective partnering and licensing. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Janita Good. Janita, welcome to Beyond Biotech.
I'm delighted to be here, and I look forward to talking to you, Dylan.
Janita, maybe you can tell us at the start a little bit about your journey towards the role that you have today. You're in law, but you also have a background in biochemistry.
Yes, so I started my life, as many people do, as an academic. So that meant a first degree, then followed by a DPhil at Oxford. And it was the DPhil that was in biochemistry, which was a fabulous time, particularly in Oxford. I had a reasonably easy ride in that my graphs were at distance, if we say there were big distances between the lines, so I didn't have to do much stats. It was also plant biochemistry, so I had to wait around a little bit for my plants to grow. So that gave me lots of opportunities to do lots of other things in Oxford, which was a ball. However, I did realise that wet bench research was probably not for me in the long term. And so I researched what else might be available. And I had a couple of mates actually had retrained to be lawyers, as simple as that. And so I thought, okay, let's give that a go. And so then I went into the law conversion course, and then came out the other end with a training contract. And then off I went. Because as a scientist, everybody said, I think you should be an IP lawyer. And I am, to some extent, an IP lawyer, but only in a transactional sense. So some of the sort of detail that you do on the wet bench, if you go kind of right deep into IP, so patents really, then it was a little bit about more that rather than I must have had some genes that expressed being commercial, and previously they hadn't expressed their proteins. But as soon as I started doing some law and did some transactions, we got a lot of protein out of those genes. And that's been the direction of travel in my career. So for transactions in this, in the life sciences space, because I've got that scientific background, then I could distinguish myself to some extent from what we sometimes call knockabout corporate lawyers, or we don't care which sector we're acting in, we just like doing a deal. So that's how I distinguished myself, if you like. And I've kept very close to not only clients but contacts and the industry. I'm very active in the BIA. I sit on 2 of their committees, and I network and enjoy that very, very much. So that's that. If that answered your question, Dylan, that's how I've got to where I am now as being a transactional life science lawyer.
It does, and now you're at Fieldfisher, and they have a strong focus on the life sciences. Maybe you could tell me a little bit about what you do day to day, the sorts of support that the firm provides to clients who are in pharma, who are in biotech.
Yes, so we have have a sector focus at Fieldfisher, and life science is one of our sectors that we concentrate on, and we bring together lawyers with different skill sets in the life sciences industry. And I think maybe one of the things that distinguishes us from other firms, before Fieldfisher, I was at Osborne Clarke. And I know from some of the other firms that are kind of our peers, if you like, that we've got a really strong regulatory group, and that's a pan-European regulatory group. So when we're doing transactions or whatever, there always will be sometimes some deep due diligence needed, and the regulatory lawyers then really come into their own. And then we are a completely full service law firm, and we have expertise in areas that touch life sciences that I wasn't quite expecting when I arrived. So we've got expertise in real estate. So we act for some of the innovation campuses, particularly around the Cambridge area. And then life sciences companies are like any other company. They need support on employment law, data privacy, etc., etc. And of particular interest to me and others at the firm is that often in this industry, the C-suite and wider than that will accept a remuneration package that would be below market for the proper REM package, but then so long as they're structured correctly, then they participate in equity incentive arrangements, which, if you think about them right at the start, can be very, very powerful as both instruments that lock in executives, but also really incentivize them.
Is this what makes Fieldfisher different? This broad coverage, this broad approach to legal affairs?
Many other firms will be full service like we are, but we harness these special areas and bring them together, not only in the UK, I'm an English lawyer, but also across our European offices. And compared to other firms, we have proper integrated offices. They're part of our partnership, whereas there are looser relationships between what look to be other parts of law firms that are based elsewhere. So I think, as I said before, it's this really strong and mature regulatory practice. We're very famous for data privacy, and obviously data is right at the heart of what therapeutic biotechs and medtech companies do. So, and we are a very collaborative firm, and we have quite a bit of fun as well. We're not too formal about it. And I think I'm not the only person that has these genes that express being commercial. So that may distinguish us.
The reason I wanted to have you on the podcast this week is to run through some of the things that you've seen and that you're still seeing in the industry, and dive into a few areas where the biotechs in our audience, they can often run into trouble. And whether that's anything from IP, but really also their engagement with top pharma, their engagement with investors, that road to commercialization that you're talking about in BD for their innovation, the legal pitfalls that they run into that aren't, the really basic stuff that any firm is going to run into, but industry specific. I'm really hoping we can dig up some best practices, some really practical advice. And I think where I want to start is around partnering. A lot of the biotechs, their goal, they're looking to partner with a large pharma firm, but that's sort of an ephemeral goal for anybody who spins out of a university. How early do these conversations need to start with pharma firms?
Okay, so let's just look at typical structure of a therapeutic biotech. Let's say it's a spin out in your example. And let's say it's got a really cool technology that's patented, and that spins out of a university. Let's say it's a AlphaFold technology. Big conversations around that after Isomorphic Labs launched with DeepMind. Let's say it's a platform technology. It's got some AI elements in it, etc. And that company also, as long as well as having the technology, it runs its own programs. Typically, it would start with a program in a particular area with a particular modality, and maybe in an indication that connected to that modality. Let's say that's respiratory. And they're always advised by not just lawyers, but the rest of the industry that you don't want to be a one-trick pony unless you're really focused on what that might mean. I can come back to that a little bit later. So when you've got your lead asset, then you'll be already looking at what you could put in your pipeline to be the follow-on assets, which modulates or it smooths out, if you like, some of the risk. So, by example, then we've got a company with a platform technology, a lead asset, and some follow-on assets. And going to your question, Dylan, when should you start thinking about partnering with pharma? Well, right from the start, really. And that's because if you look at what pharma does, it takes a look usually at the lead asset. It may look at what's in the pipeline, but it takes a look at the lead asset. It may even do a strategic investment in the company. I've seen that working with Takeda and Lilly, and that's to kind of take a look inside to see what's happening. But actually they are, let's say, only interested in the lead asset. Let's say that's in respiratory. And we go back 20 or more years, and I think we've seen farmers saying, oh, wow, that really does look good, because I'm a bit slow at getting my pipeline filled because I'm big juggernaut, etc. And then they go shopping and they buy the whole company. So that's a whole M&A. But actually, they were only interested in the lead asset. So that's quite wasteful. Then, in my example, we had the platform technology and we had the follow-on assets. So that's one way it might go. Another way it might go is they come along and say, okay, I want to do a partnering deal on the lead asset. So that's a deal at the asset level. So it's an IP out license from the biotech. Everyone knows how these things are structured. And upfront, over the years, the size of the upfronts been somewhat eroded, although with hot technologies at the moment, actually seeing some bigger upfronts. And then typical milestones in relation to getting into the clinic, then through reg, and then finally into commercialization. And then the thing that kind of keeps it all going, often for far too long, for the investors in the company, is then a royalty tail right at the end. So most biotechs are funded by either institutional investors, maybe sometimes in the earlier days, individuals who've been in the industry before, let's call them business angels. But actually, as soon as you've got funds in there, they don't want to stick around because they promised their investors that we won't stick around, we're going to get you an exit. Okay. So a partnering deal is not ideal. The tax can be quite inefficient as well. The only thing that's going to happen is once you've got over your losses, granted, you will have a lot of losses because you're a biotech, then you'll be into paying corporation tax. And notwithstanding, there are some tax breaks like patent box, etc., etc. So, what might you think at the very start? And it's really quite easy at the start. It gets less easy as time goes on. So my advice, even to a startup, is have two companies, a holding company and an operational company, which is a subsidiary. The reason the holding company is important is because it's not trading. And therefore, if it can house assets that those assets are not trading, that usually means shares in another company, then you've shielded the trade of the company, potential patent infringement or whatever, from the rest of it. So you set it up with two holding company and one operating company. Then let's go back to my example of platform technology, lead asset and pipeline. And pharma only interested in lead asset, let's say. So then what you do is you start your lead asset program in a separate subsidiary. So now I've got a holding company, I've got an operating company that's got the platform in it, and I've got one other subsidiary that's got the lead asset into it. And then when I start my next program, I do the same. And I shan't bore everyone on this with all the kind of tax things that you have to consider them. But if anyone's listening and wants to have a chat with one of my tax people, they're very welcome. But so long as you set it up, knowing what the tax is going to be moving forward, then it's going to be an easy gig for you. Then you can restructure it later. And I've actually got two and one in the pipeline deals with restructuring companies at the moment to actually make them into that structure. So top co, platform co, lead asset co, and then the other asset coming up. You can also buy in assets in that way. Got one company doing that as well, rather than make your own programs off your own platform. And that is the strategy of companies that do an in-licensing arrangement.
That sounds like it works perfectly for biotechs. Is there any disadvantage for pharma coming in and dealing with a company like that?
Yeah. So pharma comes in, and now it's that lead asset that it's interested in. In my example, that's in respiratory. Now, as long as it was structured correctly, all the things related to that asset is in one separate company. If it does a partnering deal or it wants to buy the assets, whatever, it's got to tease out all of those from the rest of the sometimes single company. That's mucky. Have you got all the IP you needed? Whereas if you set it up like this, you absolutely make sure that SPV has got everything it needs, so it's packaged up nicely. So pharma comes along and says, oh, fantastic, I'll buy the package, i.e. the shares in the SPV. Biotech's very, very, very happy because when it buys those shares, some of those proceeds will go into Holdco and could then be deployed to some of the other programs, or indeed could be dividended out to shareholders. Probably not too efficient for individuals, but efficient for usually VCs who are offshore. So they're very pleased. They've got a partial exit, if you like. So that's biotech very, very happy. Shareholders of biotech very, very happy. Pharma are also happy because they've got this all nicely packaged up lead asset. And it's not like doing an M&A whereby you pay all the money up front. Biotech M&A is never like that. But you can structure it a bit like a partnering deal, except that you wouldn't have a big, long royalty tail at the end. So that you pay deferred consideration for the shares when you come up to your various milestones. And it's nice and clean. And you may want to take some of the personnel that connect to that asset into that program. You've now got it as a company, easier for you than pulling out the chief scientist who does the lead program, because the biotech is going to say, no, you're not my chief scientist. So it's this package that then is very attractive to them.
So you're got the fantastic way to set up the company. It's possible to restructure like that in the future. But how many biotechs are actually setting themselves up like this from the beginning, getting that advice?
Depends which law firm they go talk to. No. There are others that do this. So I've done some work with specialist tax advisors of a guy that I sit on the BIA tax finance committee with. I'll plug you, Richard Turner at FTI Consulting. And we've had quite a few nice partnerships looking at that. We promulgate some of this. We give some talks together, whatever. So we are seeing it. It's sometimes called a hub and spoke arrangement. And then there are VCs that say, I love this asset. They call it asset-centric investing. Medici Ventures is probably the one that most people have learned about it. And just going back to how early you do it, so long as you think about this right at the start, you won't mess up the tax. It is easy to mess up the tax. So just that early advice, it's inexpensive at the beginning. It gets more and more expensive as time goes on and less easy to do. So I think quite a few people are doing it, but
So we're thinking about partnering from the start and making that easy both for the biotech and for pharma. What about long-term, thinking about commercialization? Is this something that people need to be thinking of as soon as they spin out the company, as soon as they start getting set up?
Yeah. So let's go back to my nicely packaged up SPV. And let's say we just do really only have one asset in a platform, just one asset. We are a single asset company, but it's hot asset. So bispecific antibodies would be an example at the moment, and ADCs, despite it being all pretty crowded. There's still lots and lots of interest in that area as well. So and some of the new modalities, if you've got a GLP-1 receptor agonist in your back pocket, then obviously a single asset company, perhaps with some formulation, would be pretty sexy. However, if you think, oh great, I've got patents, I know where I'm going on this. Actually, there might be a so what? All right, okay, there is a problem to be solved here, but what's the market size? Who else is there? Who are your competitors? What's the clinical development program look like? Have I actually spoken to someone who does early stage clinical development? Have I looked at what then the regulatory pathway might be, or even the reimbursement once we're out the other side? Because if you've looked and you've possibly, and you don't have to imply these people, lots of these companies are quite virtual and they buy in these assets. But if you start the other end of the telescope, that was your end, Dylan, i.e. the commercialization, and you look backwards, then actually knowing that you need to be able to answer the questions of your particularly early stage investment or even later stage investors to be say, what's the size of the market then? Who are the competitors? What's the IP landscape look like? Have you really got freedom to operate, etc., etc.? So just always looking at that end and saying, right, who do I need to be talking? And even your branding at an early stage, that could be really important. I mentioned isomorphic labs. Everyone knows that. They branded themselves very well, etc. So all of that, so is that being, complete commercial beast, even if your founders are academic founders, then actually having these commercial consultants sometimes or operators is really important and enjoyable, interesting, talking about the whole of the business, not just a bit of business.
You've mentioned a couple of things just there that that might come into the answer here. But if we're talking about the legal considerations that come into play early on for a company like that, yes, there's branding and patent protections. There's employee law, which you mentioned before. There's this regulatory path and the freedom to operate. What else should be at the top of the mind of these teams when they're thinking about the legal challenges that they'll face early on?
Okay. Let's. I primarily I do some IP transaction, primarily a corporate lawyer. Okay, it's absolutely to understand what the equity in your company could look like moving forward. Anybody who forms a company, a founder of a company that's done one before will know this, but the complete newbies may not realize. So one of the things that we would say is, okay, if you've got to go out to a load of individuals in the early stages, because that's the only funds you can raise, think about your cap table. You're going to have a load of people on your cap table. A really big mistake right at that beginning can say, oh, let's have a shareholders agreement. And let's just say everybody's got to agree to terminate it or vary it. Oh, that's going to be a disaster if you've got all the little tiddlers having to do that. Sometimes in that early stage, a round can't be priced. We don't know. No one's going to say, yeah, I agree to that pre-money value. So you get these other instruments coming in. Convertible loan notes, there were quite a lot of those, particularly during COVID. We're now seeing more advanced subscription agreements, and there's a kind of tax reason why EIS investors may like advanced subscription agreements. But they can be very tickly as well. The Americans with their safes have sorted it out. I'm not seeing English companies with ASAs having sorted it out. And that is, if you've got 100 little investors, each with their own ASA, that's 100 separate contracts. I'm back to and I want to vary what that says. I can vary shares, usually with 75% of them agreeing. I'm in a mess because I've got 100 people then to deal with. There is a way of sorting it out, and the Americans have done it. Y Combinator did it. Fury Bio have done it. But I'm not seeing it quite so much on this side of the pond. So understanding your equity, who's going to be your shareholders, and making sure that you can get to the next round, and that can't be blocked, and you can get an exit, and that can't be blocked. And in my example of reorganizing it to be asset centric, you can, if you haven't done it at the start, put a holding company on the top. So your equity documents will, if you really think about what you want to do in the future, there's three kind of aspects really to what the equity documents are doing. They are controlling, after the investment, the operations of the company. Consent, right? So I want to put someone on the board, and that director must consent. That's all about the operations of the company. Also about what happens at the next funding round, who can participate. Those are preemption rights, or sometimes super preemption rights. And then also at the next rounds, okay, who's going to get what if we go into an exit? And then you get preference shares, participating, non-participating preference shares. What does that really mean? I'd advise anyone to run your exit spreadsheet, your waterfall, at every possible opportunity. I've come across various CEOs sometimes and their CFOs who can't do that. So that's looking at the next round, and then again those preference shares, who gets what in the exit, and then things, can I make people come into the exit with me, drag rights, and can I be fair to everybody to say that everybody can make an exit at the same time? There's a tag rights, and then I'm going to come full circle to those equity incentives. Early and proper advice on that will see you in very good stead. Nearly a lot of the M&A that I see, particularly in this sector, if something is awry, it often is in that part of the equity structure.
You mentioned fundraising there, and fundraising is something that everybody early stage in biotech is probably engaging with to a huge extent. If they're going to big events, it's either to find a partner or to find some money. And one of the things that's always stuck out to me is that fundraising, if you're trying to find an investor, you're trying to get them excited, you're probably going to be a little bit optimistic about the future and what you're going to be able to achieve. On the other side, though, when I hear pharma chiefs talk about what they're looking for cold hard data, very realistic about what's achievable. They don't want to be misled with, well, we think we can do this or we think we can do that. They want to see the numbers. How do you balance between those two? On the one hand, being optimistic and giving investors something to believe in, and on the other side saying, well, this is all the data that we have for now when you're going out to talk to pharma?
If you can, you've got someone in your C-suite, doesn't have to be the CEO, but got one or more people that have done it before. That will give investors confidence that someone's done it before. But also, anyone that's been through a number of funding rounds, then they will have experience. But hey, you won't have seen as many funding rounds as lawyers do. So sometimes you think lawyers are technical people. We're not. We're these commercial beasts as well. And because we see so many deals, we can say, yeah. If you don't fess up about this, put that in your data room. Like you had a freedom to operate search, but you've not put it in your data room. Why? And if something did come up that was, well, you need to be fixing it right now, not waiting for the VC to go into the data room and say, oh, I don't like the look of that patent, because I think it may be infringing on pharma's patent. So I think it's one piece of advice, actually. People that have done it before, and then advisors who see so many of these things, and just have a chat. You know, as I say, lawyers are not just the technical people that do the law. And go back to what I said before. Have something about your strategy in terms of your the regulatory pathway, the reimbursement, clinical development, etc., etc.
How do founders, and a lot of times they may be coming out of academia for the first time, they may be spinning out with something from a PhD or a postdoc program there. How can they avoid these sort of errors that they could potentially make? And, you know, is it just a matter of coming to see a firm like Fieldfisher and just getting the advice?
Academic founders on their own, even with good lawyers, whatever, will not just suddenly know everything about the commercial aspects of a company. Some academic founders develop, again, they've got those genes that express the commercial proteins, but some of them will never make it. Some of them actually are comfortable being academics, and they don't get being commercial. So when many companies now are spun out of universities, the universities have wised up to this. They have like a network of commercial beasties, you know, saying, okay, I'm going to introduce you to these commercial people. And if they can get quite quickly to a proper investor, that usually means an institutional investor, they shouldn't be chary about that investor wanting then to get somebody involved. They're not just being policemen to say, well, what's happening to my investment? They do have the experience then to assist then that academic focused founders. And then as time goes on, you can find that you kind of get out of founder syndrome, and that founders sometimes are let out a little bit out of the share capital because they've kind of done their job. And then you do need that more mature commercial team in the C-suite. So it's a journey.
And firms like Fieldfisher, like others, they can help decide or help advise when the time is right for the founder to step back or to return to the lab or to do something else.
Yeah, we wouldn't be quite so didactic as Tat said. I think your time's up, founder. Um, but certainly at that very started stage to say it's not going to be easy just being an academic on your own. Um, so sometimes it's the speed of it. And it depends who the founders are out of the university. Sometimes, the big professor usually stays at the university, but it might be a really cool, bright postdoc that then is one of the founders and team that up, with a really good CEO or CEO kind of in the wings because previously they've done COO or whatever it would be. So yeah, but each one is different. So but yeah, I mean for us, always come and talk to us. And we can introduce as well. We're not corporate finance advisors, but we can make introductions to say, oh, I know so and so has just sold her company and she's ready for her next challenge. So let me introduce you. In fact, just before I came on this, I had one of those conversations with someone who's I'm almost sure about to walk into one of those roles.
You deal with a lot of partnering deals, a lot of M&A. You've seen a lot of deals, and you've mentioned a couple that you're working on right now. What's your feel for the industry? Are you optimistic that this is going to continue, that there's going to be still good partnering deals, good M&A out there, or are we in sort of a bubble right now where we're getting all of this money coming in?
We're certainly not in a bubble. In fact, we've been in a kind of a muddy kind of whatever comes at the bottom of the bubble. So the bubble's at the top. We've been 3 years. It must be at least 3 years now. We've been in the slump. We've been in the mud. And I went to JP Morgan in January. It didn't rain, which was a bonus. Um, but the mood did seem better than the previous couple of years. I know we were coming out of COVID then. It did seem a little brighter. And I talked to a couple of big US law firms, and they said they had a small queue of potential IPOs because once you get the stock markets moving across the pond, that will bounce into the London Stock Exchange. And I also heard at JPM that some of the dry powder was being hydrated. I don't know why we talk in riddles, but the dry powder, the money that's sitting there that hasn't been deployed and obviously hydrated because we're talking to a bunch of scientists, they know what happens when you hydrate dry powder. So we this year, that's calendar year, we've started to see a bit more hope and movement. So our ECM team, our capital markets team, they've been talking to quite a few of the banks, and it does look like things are picking up. We are about to, I can't tell you now because it's not announced, but we've been advising one of the banks on a proper biotech float on the London Stock Exchange. So yeah, so I think there are going to be deals around, and not the wrong sort of deals, the distressed asset deals, although those will still be there. And on the partnering side, the deals with pharma, then I think looking at some more innovative deal structures there will enable that as well. I've even seen some of the, if you use the SPV structure, I've even seen some of this is how we share the proceeds, or we share the deferred consideration. So it's a bit more like partnering on the asset. I've even seen those embedded in the articles of association of some companies. So I'm not going to go rah, 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 we're heading for a bubble, but we don't want to go into a bubble. We want a nice gradual, recovery here and some of these new modalities I've mentioned a few earlier, then there is proper interest in that. And of course, you can't go anywhere now unless you talk about AI, but there's some proper use of AI with AI agents that are proprietary that are now being used in drug development and also going into the clinic. Anything that makes the clinical development shorter, time is money, and every day not in the clinic is, what I think I heard someone say that one day into commercialization rather than in the clinic can amount to at least £1 million.
Yeah. It sounds like we're, if not popping the champagne just yet, we're at least optimistic heading into the rest of the year. Janita, for listeners who want to learn a little bit more about Fieldfisher or to reach out, where should they go?
I've got it's not a long first name, but it's quite an unusual first name. So you just put my name into Google, even if you can't remember Fieldfisher, just put Janita, Janita, and my surname's easy because it's good. Just put that in, I'll come up, and you can just give me a call, including on my mobile. All of that's well disclosed on our website. Or if you've heard this, give me a call, drop me a line, whatever. And it may not be me that you want to talk to. I've talked about those brilliant regulatory lawyers and data privacy lawyers. I can put you in touch with the right people.
Janita, thanks for joining us today on Beyond Biotech.
Oh, it's been absolutely delightful. And Dylan, I've enjoyed every moment of it. Thank you.
That's it for this episode. Don't forget to check out all the latest news and analysis at Labiotech.eu. I hope wherever you are in the world, you have a great week ahead. Thanks for listening, and I hope you'll join us again next time for another Beyond Biotech.